Hello everyone, my name is Dan and I make competitive Warhammer 40k content. I got a lot of good feedback on my video on combat phase mistakes, and I wanted to make another video on shooting phase mistakes. But the goal of this video is to make you an expert on the shooting phase and figure out the mistakes you're making in your game, as well as how you can exploit your opponent's mistakes. We're going to be going over 6 things. The first is not knowing how the shooting phase works. Number 2 is shooting in the incorrect order. Number 3, not planning for bad luck. 4, incorrect weapon to target pairing. 5, removing the wrong models when you're being shot at. And 6, not knowing your opponent's reactive strat. It sounds kind of silly, but many people don't actually know how the shooting phase works. So for example, on the left here, we have in blue a repulsor executioner that's shooting at some red targets that are slightly behind an obscuring piece of terrain. What happens is blue will roll his attacks for that twin heavy onslaught Gatling cannon. Red will pull some models away and then say, "Ha, you can't shoot at me anymore with any of your other weapons because you're not in my line of sight anymore." And that's not true. So it's important to know that the way the shooting phase works is you select a unit from your army that you want to shoot with, and then you select which target all of your different weapons are going to shoot at before you resolve any of them. Okay, so that is how the shooting phase works initially. And they put a rule in the core rulebook that says, note, as long as at least one model in the target was visible and within range when the unit was selected as a target, the weapon's attacks are always made against the unit, even if no models in the target unit remain visible or in range when you come to resolve them. So what that means is you resolve all of those attacks from a model at the same time, and you cannot pull yourself out of line of sight during a model's attacks. So if anyone ever tries to tell you that you can't keep shooting with your model because you're no longer in range or line of sight, they are wrong. The second mistake we're going to be going over is incorrect shooting order, specifically removing your line of sight by shooting in the incorrect order. In this example, we'll have blue 1 and blue 2. These are different units that do not attack simultaneously. We have some red models on the right and then a piece of obscuring terrain near blue 1. So if blue 2 starts, shoots first, and kills some of red's models, red can actually pull so that blue 1 can no longer have line of sight. Now it's important to remember that different units don't attack simultaneously, just all of the attacks that one unit or model does. So now, by attacking with blue 2 first, we gave our opponent the ability to remove models that would prevent blue 1 from attacking. So instead, if we start by attacking with blue 1, you'll see that there's no way that red can remove enough models to get out of blue 2's line of sight. Because of that, blue 2 will still be able to attack after blue 1. In a similar vein, you can get your own models out of range. But let's say we have another 2 blue models, one with a short range flamer and one with a long range bolter. If bolter goes first, red can choose which models take wounds, and will pull those models that are in range of the flamer out, and thus blue 1 can't attack anybody. So in this scenario, blue 1 should be the one to attack first. That way, red can't pull models to get out of range of blue 2. The takeaway is that generally in your shooting phase, you want to attack with closer models that have less line of sight. You should always assume your opponent is smart and is going to try to get out of line of sight or range with the wounds they take on their models. Another mistake I want to add here is reducing the number of attack of your blast weapons by shooting in the incorrect order. The way blast works is that you will get guaranteed numbers of attacks by shooting at units of larger size. So if the enemy unit is between 6 and 10 models, you get a guaranteed 3 attacks, and if it's 11 or more, you get guaranteed max shots. So in this scenario, we'll have light blue with bolters, big blue has a blast. If you start with the bolters, red is able to pull some models. Now big blue will not be able to get a guaranteed max shots. So instead, if he had shot first and then the light blue guys shot their bolters, you would get more attacks overall. Mistake number 3 is not planning for bad luck. So on the left here in blue, we'll say these are eradicators with heavy melter rifles that are shooting at a Redemptor Dreadnought in red that are slightly over 12 inches away. I ran the numbers, and those eradicators are expected to do about 12.5 damage to the Redemptors, who have 13 health, and that gives you a PK, or probability of kill, of about 50%. So many people will look at this and say you're expected to 1 Dreadnought, and that is the average, and then get upset when they don't, even though it's only a 50% chance of happening. If you're curious how to calculate this, I did a beginner math video that I'll link up above as well. So we'll say the blue Eradicators shoot the red 1 Redemptor and they do 9 points of damage, bringing him to 4 health. If you do the math out with some software, you'll see that there's about a 20% chance you'll do 9 or less damage. That means many times throughout your shooting phase, the game, and the tournament, you will have unlucky rolls and you will not get the expected result. That's just how math works. And now because you counted so much on doing the expected damage to red 1, your blue Eradicators on the bottom are not able to shoot red 1 and have to shoot red 2 instead. Let's say they do 8 points of damage and you get a little unlucky on that too. Well, let me ask you a question. What do you think does more damage? 2 bracketed Redemptors or 1 fully dead Redemptor? The answer is 2 bracketed Redemptors, and it's by a wide margin. If blue had put their bottom Eradicators slightly more forward, they would be able to shoot red 1 and clean up that mistake. So now they shoot and kill red 1. It's important to know that consistency is usually better than efficiency. You want to make sure you finish off units like the Redemptor. You want to give yourself the option to fix unlucky dice rolls when they occur, because they will. It may feel bad that you wasted damage on red 1. In reality though, you are going to take less damage by doing this. And it's not a guarantee. Maybe you do kill red 1 with your first shot and you don't have to attack them with your second unit of Eradicators, but you have the option and you never want to take away that option from yourself. The fourth mistake is incorrect weapon to target pairing. Now I know people are going to kind of joke at this because they're going to say, well, of course I'm not going to use my Eradicators to shoot guardsmen. I'm going to use them to shoot vehicles like the Redemptor Dreadnought. But this is not the extreme example I'm talking about. There are many different defensive stat lines that exist on a spectrum. There's many things that exist between a guardsman and a vehicle. And we already know that Eradicators with their low amount of high damage attacks are going to do more effective shots against a Redemptor than a guardsman, because guardsmen are so cheap. So even if you do the most and kill 6 of them, you've only actually taken about 30 points of your opponent's army. But let's dive into this deeper because many answers aren't nearly as obvious. So for example, let's say we have those same Eradicators again with 6 shots at strength 8, AP 4, damage 6 plus 2 weapons. They can either choose to shoot at Outriders, which are toughness 5 with 4 wounds and a 3+ save at 50 points apiece, or they can shoot at Blade Guard veterans with toughness 4, 3 wounds, and a 4+ invulnerable save at 35 points apiece. So if these Eradicators are going to shoot both different types of units, which one is going to kill more points of models? Now this one isn't going to be obvious because you wound the Blade Guard vets on 2, but the Outriders on a 3. You automatically kill the Blade Guard vet, but you don't always kill the Outriders. But the Outriders don't have an invulnerable save. And this can be kind of hard to figure out on the fly. So we can do the math out, and what we'll find out is that you're actually going to kill about 110 points worth of Outriders with the same type of shooting. If you shoot at Blade Guard vets, you're only going to do about 60 points of damage. So what's the most efficient target here if you're just going for points? It's the Outriders. So by doing the math, you can see that it's more efficient to shoot the Outriders than it is to shoot the Blade Guards. But that isn't always the case. It's not like Blade Guard are just inherently more defensive than Outriders. If we do the same test, but this time instead we'll use heavy intercessors using Hellstorm Bolters in Tactical Doctrine, so that's 24 Strength 5, AP 1, Damage 1 weapons against the same targets, you'll see that you'll only kill about 32 points of Outriders and 53 points of Blade Guard veterans. So in this case, it's actually more effective for the heavy intercessors to shoot the Blade Guard veterans than it is to shoot the Outriders. So if we're just trying to be as efficient as we can points-wise with our shooting, the best thing we can do is have those Eradicators shoot the Outriders and the heavy intercessors shoot the Blade Guard vets. Now, of course, in a game of competitive Warhammer 40k, there are many other variables that would push you to choose shooting different targets with your models, but it is important to know how to pair a weapon to a target to get the best value. It can be pretty hard to come up with a rule of thumb. It's easy to say Eradicators shoot tanks and Bolters shoot guardsmen, but there's many things that exist in between. One of the key things to remember is that you're paying for every single stat on your weapon. That's strength, armor piercing, and damage. And your opponent is paying for all their defensive stats, their toughness, their wounds, their armor save, invulnerable saves, or feel no pains. So you want to look for breakpoints in comparing stats. So for example, if you have strength 5 or 8 versus toughness 2, that's going to give you the difference between, wounding on a 3+ or wounding on a 2+. So if you have a strength 6 or 7 weapon, you're paying points for something that doesn't actually change what you need to roll on a dice roll. Armor piercing is really important, like we saw in that previous example. 4 AP is what you needed to do on the Outriders to give them no possible chance to save, whereas the Blade Guard vets, the first AP brought their save from a 3+ to a 4+ invulnerable, and then any armor piercing after that was worthless. It's also important to look at the overkill damage. If you have 3 1 damage weapons going against a 3 wound target, that will kill the same amount as 2 2 damage weapons. So if you're trying to be as efficient as possible, look for those important breakpoints. Mistake number 5 is removing the wrong models in your opponent's shooting phase. So I'm not just giving hints for you when you're shooting, but also you when you're being shot at in your opponent's shooting phase. This is very similar to mistake number 2, where we saw making mistakes to shoot yourself out of line of sight or range, but there's different ways as red we can remove our models to improve our game. So let's say blue 1 shoots at red, does 6 wounds, and we pull off 6 models, and then blue 2 goes, they shoot. We still want to keep ourselves on our objective, and then blue 2 is able to charge and get on the objective. So at the end of that, we lost our entire unit, and blue 2 got to be on the objective. So that was pretty bad for us. Now let's see if we can do that any better. So the questions you should be asking yourself whenever you're taking wounds on your models is, can I get out of line of sight or range of future shots? Second question is, can I make future charges by my opponent harder to make? And do I need to leave models in certain locations? Now let's go and say that blue 1 shoots our red models and does 6 damage. It's important to note that as red, we get to choose the models that we take off after we see the amount of damage we're taking. So you may choose to take different models off if your opponent gets a good roll or a bad roll. So let's say blue takes 6 off, and we pull guys off, and we're trying to get out of line of sight or range of blue 2. Great, now blue 2 can't shoot us, and we're left with 4 guys. Now let's say blue 1 goes, shoots, and kills 4 of our models. We can't get out of line of sight of blue 2 by only picking up 4 models. So instead we have a decision point. Are we going to remove the orange model or the yellow model? If we leave the orange model on, we stay on the objective, but if we leave the yellow model, we'll be slightly further from blue 2's charge range. Now this is something you're going to have to decide in your game, how much the difference between 1 or 2 inches on a charge is worth compared to leaving your model on that objective and taking that risk. So for this example, we really want to stay on this objective, and we'll kill the yellow model instead of the orange one. Now blue 2 can shoot, and we'll say we take 4 damage, left with only 2 guys, very similar to the last example. We're going to try to keep ourselves on the objective. So you can see in this scenario, all the same amount of wounds as the first scenario, the order in which we pulled allowed us to stay on the objective and still increase blue 2's charge range. Mistake number 6 is not knowing your opponent's reactive stratagems. Almost every army has stratagems they can use that will make your shooting worse. One example is Smokescreen, which is -1 to attack, Transhuman Physiology, which means you can only be wounded on a 4-up, or Unwavering Phalanx, which reduces the damage of incoming attacks by 1. So there are many different ways your opponents can reduce your shooting's effectiveness. Now, one really important piece of all of these stratagems that I'll underline is the fact that they say, until the end of the phase. So that means once your opponent uses this, every other shot that comes after against that unit will receive that debuff. Now we can be a little tricky and play around our opponent's reactive stratagems as long as we know what they are. So in this example, blue will have 2 different units, one that shoots strength 5 damage 2 weapons, and one big guy that shoots strength 8 damage 3 weapons. Red will have 2 different units that are both toughness 4 and wound 3. Blue wants to shoot the top red models because they are closer to him and he does not want to get into close combat, so that is his priority. So if blue starts by shooting with their big blue guy, red will likely use transhuman in response and reduce the damage. Now the light blue models are left with 2 bad choices. Either they shoot the guys that already have transhuman, which would slightly reduce their ability to wound, or they can shoot at the orange guys who they didn't really want to shoot in the first place. So how could we have done this better? So instead, let's shoot with the light blue models against the red models first. Now red can use transhuman, and it would be beneficial. It would bring us up from wounding on a 3 to wounding on a 4. But if he does that, he opens up the orange models to be shot at by Big Blue. And Big Blue, wounding on 2s with perfect damage weapons, is going to kill all of those orange models. So what red is probably going to do is hold off on using transhuman. Because of this, light blue was able to target the unit they wanted, and it didn't have transhuman. So now, after Big Blue shoots the red guys, now red uses transhuman. But he had to wait, because if he had used it initially on the light blue guys, Big Blue would have gotten a great shot on orange. Generally, what you want to do is you want to delay using models that would cause opponent to use their reactive stratagems. You want to give them only bad options with a stratagem to start, and then make them use it later on when it would have been more beneficial earlier, but you also could have punished them if they used it earlier. Also, many stratagems are used at different points in the phase. Let's say you're playing Thousand Suns and you use a stratagem called Wrath of the Wrong. But if we remember from a shooting phase, we have to select the model we're going to shoot with first, and then we select the target. So in the case of these two stratagems of Thousand Suns versus Space Marines, we have to choose to use Wrath of the Wronged first, and then our opponent gets to choose to use Transhuman. And if they use Transhuman, that will completely negate our Wrath of the Wronged. So what I would do is wait till my very last unit to use Wrath of the Wronged in order to force them to use Transhuman Physiology, or just not use it at all, because your opponent always gets to choose to use Transhuman after you've chosen to use Wrath of the Wronged. If you're interested in discussing strategy with us and talking about these type of tactics, please join us on our Discord. I'd love to have you with us. Also, one of my good friends has created some outro music for us, so please give me a comment and a like saying thank you, John, for the wonderful music.